Have you ever lived through a moment so unexpected, so heavy with consequences, that afterward you could barely recognize yourself? I never imagined that one quiet evening in our home, an evening that began with nothing more than a movie and casual conversation, would alter the course of my life in ways I'm still struggling to understand. Looking back, I can't even tell you exactly when the line was crossed. Was it in the lingering glance, the soft brush of a hand, or the silence that carried more weight than words ever could? What I do know is that once it happened, nothing about my marriage, my family, or even myself could ever go back to being the same. That night with my stepson started innocently, but what followed has become a memory I can't erase, no matter how much I wish I could. My name is Anna. I married David when I was 32, a widower 10 years older than me, with a teenage son named Ethan. At the time, Ethan was quiet, polite, and reserved in that way teenage boys often are around new authority figures. He didn't fight me, but he didn't let me in either, and honestly, I understood. I wasn't his mother, nor did I want to take that place. I only wanted to be a steady presence in his life, someone who could support him without replacing the woman he'd lost. Over the years, we managed to find a rhythm. Ethan grew into a thoughtful young man, sometimes brooding, sometimes lighthearted, always carrying that shadow in his eyes from losing his mother so young. I admired his resilience. I tried to offer guidance where I could, though I kept my distance when he needed space. By the time he turned 18, I thought we had settled into something like friendship, layered with the complicated ties of family. David, my husband, worked long hours. He was often away late into the night, sometimes even traveling for days at a time. Our marriage was steady but lacked spark. Comfort had replaced passion, and while I told myself that was normal, a part of me longed for connection. Something deeper, something alive. I buried those feelings most days, focusing on work, the house, and holding the family together. That particular evening, David was out of town for a business trip. The house was quiet. Ethan had just graduated high school, and there was a lightness about him, as if he had finally stepped out of the shadows of adolescence. He asked if I wanted to watch a movie with him, something we rarely did together, and I said yes. It felt like a simple gesture, a small chance to bond. I remember making popcorn, the buttery smell filling the air, while he scrolled through streaming options. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow of the television. The couch seemed smaller than usual when we sat side by side, but I brushed off the thought. It was just a movie, just an evening. At least that's how it began. The movie was some action flick he'd been wanting to see. Loud explosions, witty one-liners, the kind of thing that barely held my interest. But Ethan was animated, laughing at the clever parts, groaning at the predictable twists. I found myself watching him more than the screen, noticing how much he'd changed. His jawline had sharpened, his voice deeper, his presence more commanding than the boy I once knew. I caught myself and looked away, scolding my own thoughts. He was my stepson. This was Ethan. But the air felt different, charged somehow. At one point, his hand brushed mine as he reached for the bowl of popcorn. It was nothing, surely, but I felt it linger, a spark rushing through me before I could push it aside. I laughed nervously, making some joke about him hogging all the snacks. And he smiled, an easy, genuine smile that sent another pang through me. "Sorry," he said softly, but his eyes didn't leave mine right away. That look lasted longer than it should have. As the night wore on, the distance between us on the couch seemed to shrink. A shared blanket, the faint warmth of his arm brushing mine. It all added up to a closeness that felt both innocent and dangerous. I kept telling myself to get up, to move away, but I stayed. At one point, he paused the movie to ask about my childhood. It caught me off guard. Usually Ethan was guarded, unwilling to open up. But that night he leaned in, curious, genuinely listening as I spoke about my younger years, my family, my regrets. His questions were thoughtful, his attention unwavering, and then it shifted. He asked about my relationship with his father. His tone wasn't accusing, just curious. "Are you happy with him?" he asked quietly, the question lodged in my throat. No one had asked me that in years, not even David. I hesitated, then answered honestly, most days, yes, but sometimes I feel like we're just two people living side by side. Ethan nodded, his gaze heavy. I've noticed, he whispered. The room seemed to shrink around us. My heart pounded and I wanted to tell him to stop, that this was dangerous territory. But the words stuck. Instead, I let the silence linger, both of us caught in something neither wanted to name. When the movie ended, we didn't move. The credits rolled, forgotten, as the weight between us grew unbearable. He shifted closer, and for a moment I thought he might speak, might break the spell. Instead, his hand found mine again, deliberate this time, his thumb tracing over my skin. I froze. My breath caught, torn between pulling away and giving in. Every rational thought screamed at me to stop, but the warmth of his hand, the sincerity in his eyes, it disarmed me. I whispered, Ethan. My voice trembled, half a warning, half a plea. He leaned in just slightly, his voice low. I know I shouldn't, but I can't pretend I don't feel it. The world tilted. My pulse roared in my ears. In that moment, I realized I wasn't the only one who had noticed the invisible thread pulling us closer. He felt it too, and that terrified me. The next moments unfolded like a dream I couldn't stop. His hand tightened around mine, and before I knew it, his lips brushed my cheek. Gentle, hesitant, as if asking for permission. My breath caught, and when I didn't pull away, he pressed closer, his lips grazing mine. Time seemed to suspend. The kiss was tentative, almost fragile, but it carried a weight I couldn't deny. My heart thundered, torn between guilt and longing. I should have stopped it. I should have stood up, created distance, drawn a line, but instead, I let it happen. When we finally pulled back, the silence was deafening. My chest heaved and I couldn't look at him. I whispered, This can't happen. I know, he replied, his voice raw. But I had to know if you felt it too. I closed my eyes, shame flooding me. Because the truth was undeniable, I did feel it. The connection, the pull, the longing I'd buried for so long. It wasn't just loneliness or lack of passion in my marriage. It was something about Ethan himself, his sincerity, his ability to see me in a way no one else did. We sat there in silence, neither of us moving, both consumed by what had just happened. My mind raced with images of David, of the family we'd built, of the consequences that would shatter everything if the truth ever came out. But in that moment, none of it mattered as much as the warmth of Ethan's presence, the truth we had stumbled into. It wasn't just an act of betrayal. It was a revelation of feelings I didn't know I'd been harboring. Finally, I forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, my voice barely steady as I said, We can't talk about this again. We can't let it happen. Ethan nodded, but his eyes told a different story. There was longing there, and hurt, and a quiet acceptance that things had already changed. That night, I lay awake in bed, every detail replaying in my mind. The brush of his lips, the way he looked at me, the honesty in his voice. I told myself it was a mistake, that it would fade with time, but deep down I knew it had marked me. It had marked us both. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Ethan avoided me at first, retreating to his room, offering only brief, polite exchanges when necessary. I tried to act normal, to keep the household running as if nothing had happened, but the memory of that night clung to me, a ghost I couldn't shake. When David returned from his trip, I found myself watching him differently. His familiar routines, his distracted conversations, the way he barely noticed the distance between us, it all stung more than ever. For years I had convinced myself this was enough, but after that evening with Ethan, I knew what it felt like to be truly seen, truly desired, and I couldn't unknow it. Ethan and I never spoke of it again, perhaps out of respect, perhaps out of fear, or perhaps because words could never capture what had passed between us. Yet every glance, every unspoken moment carried that memory. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if this secret will stay buried, or if it will one day unravel everything we've built. What I do know is that a single evening, innocent in appearance, can alter the course of a life. Sometimes I wonder if it was fate, if I was meant to be shaken awake from the quiet complacency of my marriage. Other times I see it only as betrayal, a choice I should have stopped before it began. Either way, that night with Ethan became a part of me. A moment suspended in time, both beautiful and damning. And though I will carry the guilt for the rest of my life, I will also never forget the way I felt, seen, alive, and utterly undone.